celebrate the development, while others are accusing the US.
For decades, the ocean was the perfect illusion. An endless blue surface. No borders, no witnesses, no police lights in the rearview mirror. Cartels believed that once a boat crossed the horizon, it vanished from consequence. Speed was their shield. Distance was their ally. And the open sea was freedom. They were wrong. What they never understood is that the most dangerous thing on the ocean is not a storm, a submarine, or a missile. It is a ship that has already seen you, hours before you ever touch open water. Long before a smuggling boat leaves the coast, something else begins to move. Not fast, not visibly. A gray silhouette hundreds of feet long adjusts its course by a single degree. Inside, officers calculate fuel burn rates, interception windows, and probabilities. No sirens, no chase, just patience. Modern naval ships are no longer hunters that sprint. They are planners that wait. From the bridge of a US Navy destroyer, the ocean does not look empty. It looks crowded with data. Every radar return, every irregular transmission, every heat signature becomes part of a growing equation. The ship does not need to be close, it needs to be correct. Cartel crews believe they control the tempo. They push their engines harder, cut tighter turns, and burn fuel faster, convinced that speed creates safety. But every knot they gain removes options. Every evasive maneuver is logged, predicted, and quietly exploited. The ship does not react emotionally. It lets the math do the work. This is not a pursuit, it is containment. Warships today operate as floating command centers. Aircraft, satellites, and helicopters are extensions of the ship's will, not independent actors. Every move in the air is timed to decisions made at sea. The ship sets the rhythm. The target dances to it without realizing the music has already ended. There is a moment, cartel crews describe it later if they survive, when the ocean suddenly feels smaller. Fuel gauges drop faster than expected, engines scream, but the horizon does not open. And then, without warning, the rules change. A warning is issued. Clear, formal, final. The ship does not shout. It does not threaten. It simply states a fact. You are no longer in control of this environment. If compliance fails, the response is precise. Engines are disabled, not destroyed. The hull is left intact. The crew survives. The boat drifts, stripped of its one advantage. Minutes later, a boarding team steps across the deck, not as police chasing criminals, but as sailors enforcing dominance over controlled water. And sometimes, there is no boarding at all. In recent years, certain vessels are no longer considered crimes. They are classified as hostile platforms. They are tracked, documented, and erased from the ocean without ceremony. No arrests, no negotiations, just removal. This shift has changed everything. Routes go silent. Crews demand more money. Investors pull back. The ocean no longer feels neutral. It feels watched. Because the truth is simple. The ocean was never empty. It was only unobserved. And now, ships don't chase smugglers across the sea. They decide whether those ships get to exist on it at all. For decades, the open ocean was treated as a blind zone by criminal networks, a vast stretch of water where law thinned out with every mile from shore. Cartels invested heavily in that assumption. They built faster boats, lighter hulls, more powerful engines, believing that the sea itself was their greatest shield. What they failed to understand was that the ocean was never uncontrolled. It was simply controlled by ships they could not see, did not hear, and did not know how to measure. To a smuggling crew, the ocean feels empty. The horizon is flat, radar contacts are few, and the nearest coastline fades behind them within hours. But to a modern warship of the United States Navy, the same ocean is dense with structure. Shipping lanes, thermal layers, acoustic behavior, fuel range envelopes, historical traffic patterns, all of it forms a predictable environment. The ship does not need constant visual contact. It operates on expectation rather than reaction. Naval ships are uniquely suited for this kind of dominance because they do not rely on speed alone. A destroyer cruising at a steady, fuel-efficient pace can remain on station for weeks. Its endurance is not measured in hours, but in operational cycles. Cartel boats, by contrast, live on borrowed time. Their entire strategy depends on a narrow window in which no large surface combatant happens to be close enough to matter. That window has been shrinking for years. One rarely discussed reality is how much of the ocean is quietly owned by ships at any given moment. Naval tasking orders divide vast regions into overlapping patrol boxes, many of them covered intermittently rather than continuously. To a smuggler, this creates the illusion of randomness. Long stretches of nothing, followed by sudden confrontation. In reality, those gaps are intentional. Ships are positioned to observe corridors, not chase targets blindly. The goal is not to be everywhere, but to be where it matters most. In the early 2010s, internal naval studies reportedly showed that fewer than 20% of interdictions required a high-speed surface chase. Most successful stops began with a ship that never increased speed at all. Instead, it adjusted course slightly, allowing the target to move deeper into a box where escape options collapsed naturally. Some officers half-jokingly referred to this as letting the ocean do the work. The sea limits fuel, endurance, and mechanical tolerance far more ruthlessly than any pursuing vessel. There are also psychological factors at play. Large naval ships project inevitability. Even when they are not visible, their presence is felt through radio warnings, aircraft shadows, or sudden changes in traffic behavior around a suspect vessel. Former smugglers have claimed that once they knew a major warship was operating somewhere in the region, crews became tense, burned fuel faster, and made worse decisions. Whether or not every such account is true, the pattern is consistent. Ships alter behavior simply by existing in the operational space. Some accounts suggest that certain destroyers maintain informal reputation zones, areas where repeated interdictions have trained criminal networks to reroute cargo without ever seeing the ship responsible. While difficult to verify, this aligns with a broader truth. Surface ships are not just physical obstacles, but anchors of control. They define what routes are viable and which ones are not. The most important shift is that ships are no longer reactive tools dispatched after a crime is detected. They are proactive instruments of denial. By holding key maritime terrain, fuel choke points, convergence zones, and known handoff areas, they force cartels to redesign entire logistics chains. Faster boats do not solve this problem. More fuel only delays it. As long as ships remain on station, the ocean stops being neutral. The cartels believed the sea belonged to whoever dared to cross it. Naval ships quietly proved the opposite. Control does not come from movement, but from presence. A modern naval ship is no longer just steel, engines, and weapons moving across water. It is a decision-making organism, and at its core sits the Bridge and Combat Information Center, where the ocean is reduced to variables and outcomes. In the contemporary doctrine of the United States Navy, the ship itself is the brain of the operation. Everything else, aircraft, satellites, patrol boats, even distant command authorities, feeds into it, but the final judgment is made at sea. From the outside, a destroyer appears calm and methodical, holding course while the horizon barely changes. Inside, the environment is anything but static. Radar operators track surface contacts that may or may not matter. Intelligence officers correlate radio emissions with known smuggling networks. Navigation teams calculate how currents and sea states will shape future movement. Every department contributes fragments of reality, and the ship fuses them into a single operational picture. This is why ships are so dangerous to adversaries who rely on improvisation. A smuggling boat reacts to what it sees. A warship acts on what it already knows. One of the least understood advantages of ships is time compression. While cartel crews make decisions minute by minute, often under stress and incomplete information, a naval ship operates hours ahead of the present. By the time a suspect vessel is visually detected, the ship's officers may already have modeled 3 or 4 likely courses of action. Fuel consumption curves, mechanical limits of small engines, and historical behavior patterns are factored in quietly. The ship does not wait to be surprised. It waits to be confirmed. There are documented cases where a destroyer altered course by only a few degrees, hours before a smuggling boat even entered open water, based purely on predictive analysis. Official reports describe these adjustments as routine navigation decisions. Unofficially, some officers admit they were positioning the ship as a silent gatekeeper. The target was never chased. It simply sailed toward a problem it could not see. The command authority on board is another critical element. Unlike aircraft crews, whose missions are often tightly scripted and time-limited, ship commanders have wide discretionary power. They can delay, observe, disengage, or escalate without waiting for constant external approval. This autonomy allows ships to control the tempo of an operation rather than respond to it. In some instances, commanders have reportedly chosen not to intercept immediately, allowing a target to exhaust fuel or commit to a route that eliminated political or legal complications later. These decisions are invisible from the outside, but decisive in outcome. Technology amplifies this role. Modern ships integrate live satellite feeds, airborne sensor data, and historical databases into a single interface. Some systems reportedly flag anomalies automatically, highlighting behavior that deviates subtly from commercial traffic norms. While the exact capabilities remain classified, there is little doubt that ships see patterns that small crews never will. A smuggling boat may believe it looks identical to hundreds of fishing vessels. To a ship, its speed profile alone can be enough to mark it as unusual. There is also a human element that often goes unnoticed. Ship crews train together for months, sometimes years, developing a shared intuition about timing and risk. When a decision is made on the bridge, it is supported by a collective understanding of consequences. This cohesion allows ships to execute complex operations with minimal communication, reducing the chance of mistakes or leaks. Some former smugglers have claimed that US naval responses felt too coordinated to be reactive, a perception that reflects how centralized decision-making has become. In this framework, the ship is not chasing crime, it is managing space. It decides which movements are tolerated and which are corrected. Aircraft may appear overhead, and helicopters may deliver the final pressure. But those actions are extensions of decisions already made aboard the ship. The ocean, vast as it seems, is filtered through one moving point of authority. When that authority is exercised well, outcomes feel inevitable. Cartels once believed that power at sea belonged to whoever moved fastest. They failed to account for the ship that barely moves at all, yet controls everything around it. Once a ship has positioned itself as the unseen constant in an area, the nature of the operation changes. There is no dramatic reveal, no sudden acceleration, no obvious pursuit. What follows is a phase of controlled presence, where the ship allows itself to exist just outside the awareness of the target. This invisible escort is not accidental. It is deliberate, calculated, and sustained over time. The vessel maintains a distance that keeps it tactically relevant while remaining operationally quiet, relying on sensor reach rather than visual dominance. To the crew of a smuggling boat, the sea still appears open. To the ship, the target is already enclosed. This method of shadowing relies heavily on restraint. The ship does not close in unless necessary. It does not transmit aggressively or alter course in ways that would alert a watchful crew. Instead, it shapes the environment indirectly. Merchant traffic patterns are monitored, weather systems are factored in, and natural barriers such as current shifts and nighttime visibility are allowed to work in the ship's favor. Over time, the smuggler's choices begin to narrow without any obvious external pressure. Routes that seemed viable hours earlier quietly disappear. As discussed earlier, the ship functions as the operational anchor, but in this phase, its most important tool is patience. Reports from naval exercises suggest that some shadowing operations have lasted more than 12 hours without a single direct interaction. In at least one widely circulated but unofficial account, a destroyer maintained parallel movement with a suspect vessel across nearly 200 nautical miles, never appearing on radar screens the smugglers were monitoring. Whether every detail of such stories is accurate matters less than the pattern they describe. Ships do not rush toward resolution. They wait until resolution becomes unavoidable. This waiting is not passive. Every minute provides new data. Small deviations in course, minor changes in speed, and inconsistent engine behavior are noted and compared against expected norms. These micro-signals help refine the ship's understanding of the target's condition. Is the crew confident or stressed? Are they conserving fuel or burning it aggressively? Are they trying to reach a rendezvous point or simply escape? The answers inform the next phase, where the ship begins to influence behavior more directly. At this point, the operation shifts from observation to pressure, but still without confrontation. The ship adjusts its positioning to force subtle reactions. It may deploy assets in a way that alters the target's perception of risk, encouraging sharper turns or higher sustained speeds. These responses are predictable. Small boats designed for speed sacrifice efficiency when pushed beyond optimal performance. Fuel consumption increases non-linearly, engines overheat, and handling becomes less stable. The ship does not need to force these outcomes. It only needs to create conditions where the target chooses them. Fuel, more than firepower, becomes the decisive factor. Unlike naval vessels with deep reserves and logistical support, smuggling boats operate within rigid limits. Every unnecessary maneuver has a cost. Every burst of speed shortens the remaining timeline. Naval analysts have long understood this imbalance, and in recent years, it has reportedly become formalized doctrine. Some internal briefings describe the process not as pursuit, but as managed depletion. The ship sets a tempo that the target cannot sustain indefinitely. This is where the psychological strain intensifies. Smugglers are accustomed to outrunning threats, not being slowly outlasted by them. As fuel calculations become unavoidable, confidence erodes. Crews may argue over speed settings or navigation choices. Mistakes compound. Even without direct contact, the sense of being hunted emerges. Former detainees have described moments when they realized escape was no longer a matter of skill, but of arithmetic. Whether these recollections are embellished or not, they align with what the ship intends to achieve: surrender through inevitability. When the moment finally arrives, it rarely feels sudden from the ship's perspective. The conditions have been shaped deliberately. Fuel reserves are low enough to limit maneuverability. Sea state and daylight favor control. Legal and operational clearances are already in place. Only then does the ship move to assert itself openly. Communication is established, clear and formal, leaving no ambiguity about authority. By this stage, resistance is often symbolic rather than practical. If compliance is refused, the response is measured rather than explosive. The goal is not destruction, but termination of mobility. Naval helicopters or small craft act as extensions of the ship's decision, targeting engines or control systems with precision. This phase has been refined over years of operations, balancing force with safety. The ship remains the coordinator, ensuring timing and spacing prevent escalation. Once mobility is lost, the outcome is effectively sealed. Boarding operations, when conducted, are executed with the same methodical calm that defined the earlier stages. Teams deploy from the ship with rehearsed efficiency, securing the vessel and its crew quickly. Resistance is rare at this point. The smuggler's most valuable asset, their ability to move, has already been taken away. The ship then oversees the final administrative steps, from detainee handling to evidence processing. In cases where the vessel itself poses a hazard or lacks value, controlled sinking may follow, carried out according to established protocols. Throughout this entire sequence, the ship remains the central actor. Aircraft appear and disappear. Smaller units come and go, but the ship provides continuity. It holds the operational memory, the authority, and the patience to see the process through. This is why, as mentioned earlier, modern maritime control no longer depends on dramatic chases or overwhelming force. It depends on sustained presence and disciplined timing. The broader effect of this approach extends far beyond individual interceptions. Word spreads through smuggling networks, often distorted but effective. Stories circulate of boats that ran fast and still failed, of crews who never saw the ship that stopped them. Whether embellished or not, these narratives reshape behavior. Routes change, costs rise, risk calculations shift. All of it traces back to ships that controlled space rather than chased targets. In the end, the ocean does not need to be sealed to be controlled. It only needs a few ships, positioned intelligently, willing to wait. What ultimately emerges from this pattern of operations is not a series of isolated interdictions, but a structural shift in how the ocean itself is treated. As mentioned earlier, ships moved from reacting to individual targets to shaping entire maritime spaces. And this evolution has matured into a broader strategy of denial rather than pursuit. The sea is no longer viewed as a neutral medium through which anything can pass if it moves fast enough. It is treated as managed terrain, where access is conditional and increasingly selective. In recent years, naval planning within the United States Navy has reportedly begun to categorize certain maritime platforms not by intent, but by function. Vessels designed solely to move illicit cargo, especially those built to evade identification or operate without legitimate registries, are increasingly viewed as infrastructure rather than evidence. This subtle shift carries major consequences. Infrastructure can be removed without the procedural weight traditionally associated with criminal prosecution. The emphasis moves from arrest to disruption. This approach reflects a hard-learned lesson. Dismantling networks at sea is more effective than intercepting shipments one by one. When a platform is destroyed or rendered unusable, it removes months of investment, training, and coordination. Cartels can replace cargo quickly, replacing specialized vessels, crews willing to operate them, and trusted routes takes far longer. Some analysts claim that the loss of a single advanced smuggling platform can ripple through an organization's finances for an entire season. Whether the numbers are exact or not, the deterrent effect is evident. Another consequence is the erosion of negotiation itself. As referenced earlier, when vessels are treated as hostile platforms, there is little incentive for prolonged standoffs or dialogue. This has reportedly altered the psychology on both sides. Crews no longer expect dramatic chases that might end in capture and survival of assets. Instead, there is an understanding, sometimes exaggerated, sometimes accurate, that the ship they never see may never intend to board at all. The ocean becomes less a space for calculated risk and more a space of existential uncertainty. This uncertainty is amplified by selective transparency. Naval forces do not publicly explain every action or loss at sea. Gaps in information allow rumors to grow, often exaggerating capabilities. Stories circulate of vessels disappearing without warning, of routes that go cold overnight. Even if some of these accounts are embellished, they serve a strategic purpose. Fear fills in where data is absent. As a result, criminal planners must assume the worst-case scenario, driving up costs and reducing efficiency. The strategic payoff of this model lies in scale. As mentioned earlier, ships do not need to be everywhere. By focusing on key maritime junctions and denying reliability rather than access, they force networks to stretch themselves thin. More fuel is required, more redundancy is needed, more money is paid to crews. Margins shrink. Over time, the ocean stops being profitable. This slow financial suffocation is far less visible than dramatic interdictions, but far more damaging. There are indications that this strategy has begun influencing behavior far from the water. Investment patterns change. Recruitment slows. Some networks reportedly shift resources inland, where control is more fragmented and risks are more familiar. The sea, once seen as the safest leg of the journey, becomes the most unpredictable. That reversal alone represents a strategic victory. The ocean has not been closed. It has been conditioned. Ships remain the mechanism through which that conditioning occurs, not by dominating every mile, but by making every mile uncertain. In that uncertainty, old assumptions collapse. Speed no longer guarantees safety. Distance no longer promises anonymity. And the belief that the ocean belongs to whoever dares to cross it quietly disappears.